careless affair went public. The fallout left us both devastated. I ruined my chasing a spark that burned everything to ash. Hi, my name is Vanessa, and I'm 29 years old. I've been married to my husband, Jones, for 5 years. At first, we were so happy. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had each other, and that was enough. Or at least, it felt like it was enough back then. We'd wake up in the mornings, and I'd see him smile, and it felt like the world was perfect. We'd laugh about silly things and dream about the future, and it felt like anything was possible as long as we had each other. But then, 3 years into our marriage, everything changed. Jones lost his job, and I couldn't make enough from mine to cover all the bills. At first, it was just a little stressful, and we thought it was temporary. We told ourselves it was just a bump in the road, and soon everything would be fine again. But the bump turned into a hole, and the hole got deeper and deeper, and soon it felt like we were stuck. We started arguing more, but it wasn't loud or angry at first. It was small things like who forgot to pay the electricity bill or why we didn't have enough to buy groceries for the week. We'd sit down at the kitchen table late at night, trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and the conversations always felt heavy, like a dark cloud was hanging over us. I hated those talks because they made me feel scared, like we were never going to get out of this mess. And then, Jones found another job. It wasn't the best job, but it helped. We thought things would get better after that, but somehow they didn't. The new job barely paid enough, and we were still struggling. It felt like no matter what we did, there was always another bill, another problem, another thing we couldn't afford. We stopped going out for dinner or doing fun things together because we couldn't afford it. We even stopped buying little treats for ourselves, like ice cream or a new pair of socks, because every penny had to go to the bills. The worst part was that we stopped talking about anything except money. Every single conversation was about work or bills or how to fix the problems. There was no time for jokes or dreams, or even just talking about how our day went. It felt like we had become two people who were just trying to survive together, instead of two people who loved each other. It felt like we were just business partners trying to save a business, and I started to feel really lonely, even though Jones was right there. He worked hard, and I know he was trying his best, but it felt like he wasn't really there for me anymore. I missed the way he used to hold my hand and tell me everything would be okay. I missed the way he used to look at me like I was the most important thing in the world. Now, when he looked at me, all I saw was worry and stress. And honestly, I felt the same way when I looked at him. One day, we were sitting at the kitchen table and talking about money and our problems, like we always did. Jones was writing something down on a piece of paper, trying to figure out how to stretch our budget for the month. I was just staring at the table, feeling tired and frustrated. I wanted to tell him how I felt, but I didn't know how to say it. It felt like if I opened my mouth, everything would come pouring out, and I didn't want to make things worse. But then, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I blurted out that I was tired of always talking about money, and I missed how things used to be. Jones looked up at me surprised, and he asked me what I meant. I told him that I felt like money had become more important to him than me, and I didn't feel loved anymore. As soon as I said it, I wished I could take it back because I could see the hurt in his eyes. He said something about how he was working so hard for us, and he didn't know what else to do. He said everything he was doing was for me, and because he wanted to make sure I was all right. But I couldn't stop myself. I told him that I didn't care about the money, and I just wanted him to care about me again. I knew it sounded selfish, but that's how I felt. I felt like I wasn't enough for him anymore, and it hurt so much. Jones tried to explain that he did care about me, but all I could hear was the frustration in his voice. He said he was trying his best, but it didn't feel like enough to me. I told him that I didn't want his best if it meant losing the love we used to have. And then I started crying because I didn't know what else to say. He just sat there looking at me, and for a moment it felt like everything had stopped. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I was scared that I had just ruined everything. I wanted him to come over and hug me and tell me that he understood, but he didn't move. He just looked at me with this sad, tired expression, like he didn't know what to do. But then he suddenly got up and came to me. He threw his arms around me and told me that he'd try to make more time for us. But he added, I needed to be patient because there were a lot of things we needed to do, and we didn't even have half of the bills we needed to pay off. I pulled away from his embrace and got up from the table. Then I went to our bedroom because I couldn't sit there anymore. I sat on the bed staring at the wall, and I felt so alone. I kept thinking about how things used to be and wondering if we could ever get back to that. But deep down, I wasn't sure if we could. It felt like we were too far apart now, like we were two different people trying to hold on to something that wasn't there anymore. And the worst part was that I didn't know if it was his fault or mine. Maybe I was being selfish, expecting him to make me feel better when he was struggling too. Or maybe he had stopped caring about me the way he used to, but I knew that wasn't true. He just didn't have the time. He worked hard and was always tired when he was home, but that did not matter to me. Either way, it felt like we were both lost, and I didn't know how to find our way back. I stayed in the bedroom for the rest of the night, and Jones didn't come in to check on me. I could hear him moving around in the kitchen, and it made me feel even worse. I wanted to go out there and apologize, but I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know if I even meant it. I felt so confused and angry and sad all at the same time. When I finally fell asleep that night, my dreams were filled with memories of when we first got married. I saw us dancing in the living room, laughing so hard that our sides hurt. I saw us sitting on the couch, planning our future and talking about all the places we wanted to visit. And then I woke up and realized that those moments were gone, and I didn't know if we could ever get them back. The morning after my fight with Jones, I woke up feeling awful. My eyes were puffy from crying, and my head hurt from thinking too much. But that had been my life so sometime, overthinking and crying. I kept replaying our argument in my mind, and every time I did, I felt worse. I didn't like how I had yelled at him or how I made it sound like he didn't care about me. I knew he did. I knew that a lot of people would have curled into the comfort of their couches and let their wives take care of them, but Jones worked hard. When the world pushed him down, he refused to stay down. He was a good husband who was just tired and stressed, just like me. And before any of you judgmental readers start thinking that I didn't want to apologize, you're wrong. I wanted to salvage whatever it is that we had, so I decided I needed to apologize. I thought about what I would say as I got dressed and left the house. Jones was already at work by then, so I figured I'd go there and talk to him during his lunch break. I wanted to tell him that I was sorry and that I didn't mean to hurt him. I also wanted to tell him that I missed him. It felt strange to miss someone who was right there, but that's how I felt. And if I'm being honest, Jones really put in a lot of effort to try and make us work and to make me feel special in little ways. He'd hide my favorite snacks all over the house so I'd just discover them randomly, and he bought me flowers and massaged my feet when he wasn't too tired. I knew he was trying, but I just needed more, and looking at it now, I was just greedy. When I got to Jones's workplace, it was busy. There were people everywhere, and the noise made my head spin. I didn't know exactly where to find him, so I asked one of his coworkers. That's when I met Andy. Andy was tall and had this bright smile that made me forget about everything else for a moment. He was friendly and asked if I needed help, and I felt something inside me spark, like a tiny flame flickering to life. It wasn't something I had felt in a long time, and it caught me off guard. I told Andy I was looking for Jones. I didn't say that I was looking for my husband. Thinking about it now, I definitely did that on purpose. I didn't introduce myself as a married woman, maybe because I had ill intentions from the very first time that I met him, and pointed me in the right direction. But as I walked away, I couldn't stop thinking about his smile. It stayed in my mind like a song that gets stuck in your head. I shook it off and reminded myself why I was there. I wasn't there to think about Andy. I was there to fix things with Jones. But I couldn't shake off that smile and bright aura from my mind. When I saw Jones, he looked surprised to see me, but not in a bad way. I handed him the lunch I had brought and tried to apologize. He listened quietly, and I could see how my words melted away the discomfort of being upset from his face. He smiled a little and told me that we'd talk more when he got home. It wasn't the big heartfelt moment I had hoped for, but it was better than nothing. I left his workplace feeling a little lighter, but as I walked back to my car, I found myself thinking about Andy again. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. I told myself it was nothing, just a silly moment that didn't mean anything. But the next day I found myself making lunch for Jones again and driving to his workplace. I told myself I was just being a good wife, trying to make things right, but deep down, I knew I wanted to see Andy again. I felt guilty even thinking about it, but I couldn't help it. When I got to Jones's workplace, I saw Andy again. This time I didn't have to ask him for help, but he saw me and I smiled back. That same spark flickered inside me, and I felt my face get warm. I handed Jones his lunch, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept stealing glances at Andy, hoping he wouldn't notice, but also hoping he would. It was confusing and exciting and wrong all at the same time. Over the next few days, I kept finding reasons to bring lunch to Jones. Sometimes I'd make his favorite sandwich, or I'd bake cookies just to have an excuse to go. Each time I went, I'd look for Andy. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just being friendly, but I knew that wasn't true. There was something about him that made me feel alive, like I had been walking through a fog and suddenly found the sun. Then one evening, I ran into Andy at the supermarket. I wasn't expecting to see him, and when I did, my heart skipped a beat. He was standing in the produce section, looking at a bunch of bananas, and he didn't notice me at first. I stood there for a moment, trying to decide what to do. The little part of me which knew that no good would come out of this wanted to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen him, but almost every single part of me wanted to say hello. Before I could talk myself out of it, I walked over to him. I felt nervous, like a kid on the first day of school, but I smiled and said hi. Andy looked up and smiled back, and that spark I had felt before turned into a full-blown fire. We started talking, and it felt so easy, like we had known each other forever. He asked me about my day, and I told him a little about myself, and he did the same. It wasn't a deep conversation, but it felt different from anything I had felt in a long time. As we talked, I felt something I hadn't felt with Jones in years. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light and happy. It felt like a breath of fresh air. Andy made me laugh, and he looked at me in a way that made me feel seen. I didn't realize how much I had missed feeling that way until that moment. When it was time to go, I didn't want to say goodbye. I felt this strange pull toward Andy, like a magnet drawing me closer. I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't help it. Before we parted ways, I asked him if we could be friends. It felt like a bold thing to say, but I didn't want to lose the connection we had just made. Andy smiled and said yes, and my heart fluttered. I decided to take things a step further by asking for his number. I know, it must have looked desperate, but I wasn't thinking straight. I told him friends were supposed to have each other's numbers, and he was so nice and kept smiling the whole time. He also took my number, so he clearly didn't see it as me being desperate. As I walked out of the supermarket, I felt a mix of emotions. I felt happy and excited, but also guilty and confused. I knew I shouldn't feel this way about someone who wasn't my husband, but I couldn't deny the spark I felt with Andy. It was something I hadn't felt in a long time, and I didn't know what to do about it. It was the weekend. Like the devil's calendar had flipped to a page that would change everything. Jones was out for a side gig he always did on Saturdays. It was something small, like fixing things or helping out a friend, just to bring in extra money. I usually spent those weekends alone, trying to keep busy or cleaning the house. But that Saturday, my phone buzzed, and I saw a message from Andy. My heart jumped like it was trying to leap out of my chest. He texted first. I felt like the world was rotating just for me at that point. He asked if I wanted to meet up. It wasn't just a casual message, though. It felt like more, like he had been thinking about me, just like I had been thinking about him. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking a little. I knew I shouldn't be this excited, but I couldn't help it. This meant Andy was interested in me too, for sure. I felt like I was going to explode from all the emotions swirling inside me. I told myself it was just a hangout, nothing more, but deep down, I knew I wanted it to be more. I wanted to feel that spark again, the one I hadn't felt in so long. I wanted to laugh and talk and forget about all the problems weighing me down. So I got dressed, and I didn't just throw on my usual jeans and a t-shirt. I picked out a dress I hadn't worn in years, the one that made me feel pretty, and I even put on a little makeup. I told myself I wasn't dressing up for Andy, that I just needed to look nice. But I knew that wasn't true. When I arrived at the place Andy suggested, my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone around me could hear it. He was already there, waiting for me, and when I saw him, I felt that same spark all over again. It was like everything else faded away, and all I could see was him. He smiled when he saw me, and I felt butterflies in my stomach like I was a teenager going on her first date. We started talking, and it was so easy, like we had known each other forever. Andy made me laugh so much, and it felt like I hadn't laughed like that in years. I didn't realize how much I needed that until it happened. It was like a heavy load had been lifted off my back, and for the first time in a long time. I forgot about everything else, about Jones, about the bills, about the stress. At that moment, it was just me and Andy. At one point, we started talking about our lives, about the things that made us who we were. I told him about Jones, and he told me about his girlfriend. It wasn't awkward, though. It felt honest, like we both needed to say it out loud so we could understand what was happening between us. We weren't pretending our lives didn't exist, but we also couldn't deny the way we felt about each other. It was love at first sight, and we were taking a chance to see how that went, disregarding my husband and marriage. The hours flew by, and before I knew it, the sun was starting to set. I didn't want the day to end, but I knew it had to. As we walked to our cars, I felt a mix of emotions. I felt happy, guilty, excited, confused. I didn't know what any of it meant, but I didn't want to think about it. I just wanted to hold on to the way Andy made me feel for a little while longer. When we got to my car, Andy turned to me, and for a moment, everything went quiet. It felt like the world had stopped spinning, like it was just the two of us and nothing else. Then, before I could even process what was happening, he kissed me. It wasn't a long kiss, but it was enough to send my heart racing. I stood there stunned as 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. I thought I would feel bad, like I had done something terrible, but I didn't. Instead, I felt alive, like a part of me that had been asleep for years had finally woken up. I loved that kiss, even though I knew I shouldn't have. It was wrong, but it didn't feel wrong at that moment. It felt like everything I had been missing, everything I had been longing for. Andy pulled back and looked at me, and I could see the same mix of emotions in his eyes that I was feeling. He asked if he could see me again, and I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to say yes without even thinking about it, but another part of me was scared. I didn't know what this meant for me or for Jones or for Andy's girlfriend. All I knew was that I didn't want this feeling to go away. I was being childish, wanting to run away from my mistakes. I knew that if Jones ever found out about that, it would break him. Anyways, after my hangout with Andy, I felt like a completely different person. For days, I was in a great mood. It was like someone had flipped a switch inside me, and everything felt brighter. I was smiling more, laughing at little things, and even humming to myself while doing chores. I hadn't felt this light in so long. I told myself it was just the fun of the hangout, the kind of moment everyone deserves once in a while. But deep down, I knew it was because of Andy. We started chatting over the phone a lot after that day. At first, it was innocent, just quick messages. We would regularly check on each other and share things with each other. It was quite ironic because whenever I came across something funny on social media, the first person that came to mind for me to send it to is Andy. The point is, our conversations had no red flags at first. But as the days passed, our conversations began to change. They became longer, deeper, and different. We talked about things we didn't talk about with anyone else, and before I knew it, we were crossing lines. He made me feel special, like I mattered, and I didn't realize how much I had been craving that feeling. We began talking in detail about the things each of us like in sensual situations. Almost a week went by without us seeing each other, and I couldn't take it anymore. I tried to distract myself, to focus on Jones and my home, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Andy. I missed him, and I wanted to see him again. So I made the first move and asked him if we could meet. He agreed, and the excitement I felt was like nothing I'd experienced in a long time. When we met, things escalated quickly. It wasn't like we planned it, but everything just felt so intense. We ended up going to a hotel, and for the first time in years, I felt completely alive. More than that, I felt like I was on steroids. Being with Andy was electric, like finding a missing piece of myself I didn't even know was gone. It was the kind of connection I had stopped believing in, the kind that made me feel young and free. It was wrong, and I knew it, but at that moment, I didn't care. Afterward, I felt like I was glowing. It was as if all the stress and frustration that had been building up inside me had melted away. I knew what we had done was something I could never undo, but I didn't regret it. It was what I had been missing, something that Jones and I hadn't shared in a long time. Our intimacy had suffered so much over the years, and I hadn't felt that kind of attraction to him in ages. With Andy, it was effortless, and I couldn't get enough. Andy and I talked about what had happened and agreed that it wouldn't happen again. We told ourselves it was a one-time thing, a mistake we wouldn't repeat. But even as we said it, I knew we were lying. The way I felt about him, the way he made me feel, it wasn't something I could walk away from so easily. And as much as I hated to admit it, I didn't want to. We also agreed that our partners could never find out. The idea of Jones knowing made my stomach grumble in guilt. I didn't want to hurt him, even though I was already hurting him by doing this. I told myself it was better this way, that keeping it a secret was the kindest thing I could do. But the guilt didn't stop me. Andy and I couldn't stick to our promise to stay away from each other. One meeting turned into 2, then 3, and before I knew it, we were seeing each other regularly. I don't even know how I managed to find the time for an affair. Between Jones, the house, work, and everything else, it should have been impossible. But somehow, I made it work. I would tell Jones I was running errands or meeting up with a friend, and he never questioned me. It felt like I was living 2 lives, and as messy as it was, I was happy. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The affair went on for over a year. Andy and I couldn't get enough of each other. Every time we met, it felt like a secret little world where nothing else mattered. I stopped worrying about what it all meant or where it was going. I just let myself enjoy it. I knew it couldn't last forever, but I didn't want to think about the end. I was too caught up in the way he made me feel, the way he looked at me, the way he touched me. It was addictive. Then, one day, everything changed. Andy and I were sitting together, talking about something random, when he told me his girlfriend had found out about us. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He told me that she saw the videos we made together in the hotel rooms we lodged in, and I was so angry at Andy for being so careless. My mind started racing, trying to figure out what this meant, what would happen next. All I could think about was how this secret, this thing we had worked so hard to keep hidden, had finally come to light. I felt like my world was tilting. I didn't know what to say or do. My mind was spinning, but he told me there was a way to fix it, and my interest immediately piqued. His girlfriend had a condition. She wanted to join us. It sounded crazy, like something out of a bad movie, but he said it was the only way to keep her quiet. I didn't want to agree. The thought made me sick, but the idea of Jones finding out scared me more. I couldn't let him know, couldn't let my life fall apart. So after thinking about it way too long, I agreed. The plan was simple. Andy and I would meet at our usual hotel, and his girlfriend would join us there. I told myself this wasn't what I wanted, but I had no choice. It felt like I was walking into something dark and ugly, but I kept going. I thought if I did this, it would all go away. She'd keep her mouth shut, and everything would stay hidden. At least, that's what I hoped. I got to the hotel first. My hands were shaking as I checked in, and my stomach felt like it was tied in knots. I kept looking at my phone, expecting her to call or text, but there was nothing. Andy showed up a little later, and we waited together. The minutes stretched on, and she never came. We sat there in silence, both of us feeling the weight of what was happening. I told myself it was fine, that maybe she had changed her mind, but deep down, I felt something was wrong. Then, everything exploded. My phone started buzzing like crazy. At first, I ignored it, but the calls and texts kept coming. My heart sank when I finally looked at the screen. The messages were from people I knew, from friends, co-workers, even acquaintances. My stomach dropped as I read the words. Andy's girlfriend had leaked everything. There were videos, pictures, messages, everything we had worked so hard to hide. It was all out in the open, and I felt like I was drowning. I didn't know what to do. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold my phone. I began thinking hard and fast in my attempt to try to figure out how this had happened and what I was supposed to do now. I kept thinking about Jones, about how he would react, about how this would destroy him. I felt sick, like I was going to throw up, but I forced myself to leave the hotel and go home. I needed to talk to Jones, to explain, to do something. When I got home, Jones was waiting for me. His face was red and his eyes were filled with anger and hurt. He didn't even let me get a word out. He told me to stay away from him, to leave him alone. He said everyone at his workplace had seen the videos, that they were all laughing at him, and he called me an embarrassment. Hearing those words broke something inside me. I had hurt him so deeply, and I didn't know how to fix it. I tried to apologize, but he wouldn't let me. He just kept shouting, his voice shaking with rage and pain. I wanted to reach out to him, to hold him, but he pushed me away. I felt like I was watching my life crumble in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. This wasn't what I expected. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. I sat down on the floor, my head in my hands, and I cried. I cried for Jones, for myself, for everything I had ruined. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I need help. I've messed up really badly, and I need help. How do I get my husband back? Please help me, please. I am desperate. Update. Hello again. If someone told me that my life would fall apart in just under 3 months, I would have believed it. It's been that long since everything fell apart, and my life has become worse since then. Worse than you could have ever imagined. Everything about me feels like a bad dream I can't wake up from. Every day is the same, empty and miserable. I don't even recognize the person I used to be. I thought I was just making a mistake that no one would ever find out about. I thought I could keep my secret, live my double life, and somehow it wouldn't matter. But now I see how wrong I was, and I regret every choice I made. The fallout was fast and brutal. The videos Andy's girlfriend leaked spread like wildfire. At first, I didn't even know how many people had seen them, but soon it was clear that everyone had. Friends, family, co-workers, strangers online, even people in my neighborhood. It was like the world had turned against me overnight. The shame was unbearable, and the stares and whispers whenever I went outside made me feel like I was suffocating. I tried to keep going to work, but that didn't last long. People there had seen the videos too. No one said anything to my face, but I could feel it in the way they looked at me. I could hear their whispers when they thought I wasn't paying attention. My boss called me into her office after a week of this, and she said I wasn't a good fit for the company anymore. I knew it was because of the scandal. They didn't want someone like me there, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. I packed up my things and walked out of the building, feeling like a ghost. After that, I tried to find another job, but no one would hire me. My name was everywhere online, tied to the videos and the story of my affair. I couldn't even get through an interview without seeing the judgment in people's eyes. It didn't matter how qualified I was or how much I needed the job. All they saw was the mess I had made of my life. Jones moved out just a few days after the videos came out. He didn't even try to talk to me about it. He just packed his things and left. I begged him to stay, but he wouldn't even look at me. A month later, I got divorce papers in the mail. He didn't want anything to do with me anymore, and I couldn't blame him. I signed the papers and sent them back, feeling like I was closing the door on the only part of my life that had ever really mattered. I heard through mutual friends that Jones moved to another city. He got a better job there, and it sounds like he's doing really well. I'm happy for him, but it hurts so much to think about how he's thriving while I'm falling apart. He deserves to be happy, though. I was the one who ruined everything, not him. Andy disappeared too. After everything happened, he stopped responding to my texts and calls. I don't know where he is or what he's doing now. Part of me hates him for leaving me to deal with this on my own, but another part of me understands. He had his own life to clean up, and I wasn't a part of it anymore. Still, it hurts to think that someone who once meant so much to me is just gone. The financial fallout has been just as bad as everything else. Without a job, I can't afford the apartment I used to share with Jones. I had to move into a tiny place on the other side of town, where no one knows me. It's small and dingy, with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it's all I can afford. Every night, I lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life came to this. The online harassment hasn't stopped either. People still send me messages, calling me horrible names, and reminding me of what I did. Sometimes, I think about deleting my accounts, but then I feel even more alone. I don't have anyone to talk to anymore. My friends disappeared after the videos came out. Some of them said they couldn't be associated with me, while others just drifted away without saying anything. I can't blame them, though. I wouldn't want to be friends with me either. The regret is the worst part. It's like a constant weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I think about Jones every day and how much I hurt him. He trusted me, and I threw that trust away for something that wasn't worth it. I think about how I destroyed my own life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. I miss the life I used to have, even the parts that weren't perfect. I miss the person I used to be before I let my selfishness take over. Every morning I wake up and hope that somehow things will get better, but so far, they haven't. I don't know how to move forward or if I even can. All I know is that I'm alone, lost, and full of regret, and I don't know if that will ever change. I am lost, and the comments are not helping, so I am leaving the internet. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for your input.